Why Captain Kirk's tombstone said James R. Kirk in Star Trek Season 1. One of Star Trek, the original series' earliest episodes, bizarrely states Captain James T. Kirk's William Shatner name as James R. Kirk on his tombstone. Star Trek premiered on NBC in 1966 with The Man Trap, with the second pilot episode produced for Star Trek, Where No Man Has Gone Before, becoming the third episode aired. This was after NBC rejected The Cage, the first pilot produced for Star Trek, and commissioned a second with almost an entirely new cast, led by Captain Kirk replacing Jeffrey Hunter's Captain Christopher Pike. In Star Trek's Where No Man Has Gone Before, the Starship Enterprise passes through the galactic barrier bordering the known galaxy. Strange energies within Transform LT, Commander Gary Mitchell Gary Lockwood, and Dr. Elizabeth Denner Sally Kellerman into powerful and dangerous psychic beings. Mitchell's rapid evolution turns him into a threat, and Captain Kirk decides to trap Gary and Elizabeth on Delta Vega. When Mitchell battles Kirk, he uses his powers to create the captain of the Enterprise's grave, complete with a tombstone that reads, James R. Kirk. Star Trek Season 1's tombstone was a production error. James R. Kirk was simply an early mistake by Star Trek's set and props department. Where No Man Has Gone Before was only the second hour of Star Trek produced, and Mr. Spock Leonard Nimoy was the only Star Trek actor from the original pilot, The Cage, to return. Captain Kirk himself was a new character at this point, and the error of James R. Kirk is indicative of Star Trek finding its way in its early days. Star Trek writer and story editor DC. Fontana later offered an explanation, as seen in Memory Alpha. According to DC, Fontana in the introduction for Star Trek, the classic episodes 1, when the mistake was discovered, John Roddenberry decided that if pressed for an answer on the discrepancy, the response was to be Gary Mitchell had godlike powers, but at base he was human. He made a mistake. Star Trek's visionary creator John Roddenberry waves off James R. Kirk as an example of LT Commander Gary Mitchell's flawed humanity and universe. Roddenberry's explanation is also fascinating since Mitchell's evolution was an influx of psychic abilities. Yet Gary was still susceptible to human error, such as being mistaken about the middle initial of his best friend, Captain James T. Kirk. When watching Star Trek, the original series Season 1, fans must be willing to accept several errors and inconsistencies in what later became established Star Trek canon. Much of Star Trek sprang fully formed from Gene Roddenberry's imagination from the get-go, but numerous aspects of Star Trek were developed and added as the series continued on NBC. For example, Leonard Nimoy gradually invented Spock and the Vulcans' logical behavior, and Spock was markedly more emotional before Nimoy locked into Vulcan culture. Starfleet uniforms in Star Trek's Where No Man Has Gone Before are noticeably different, which makes its placement as the third episode aired visually awkward. Starfleet also wasn't the original name for the Starship Enterprise's governing body, and it was referred to by many names like Space Fleet and even United Earth Space Probe Agency. It was producer John L. Kuhn who created the United Federation of Planets and the Klingons, among numerous other tropes, when he joined Star Trek. Captain Kirk's middle name was confirmed in Star Trek VI. Captain James T. Kirk's middle name was made official canon in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, when James Tiberius Kirk was spoken aloud by General Chang Christopher Plummer during Kirk and Dr. Leonard McCoy's DeForest Kelley Klingon trial. Star Trek, the animated series, originally coined Tiberius as Kirk's middle name, but Star Trek VI is what made Tiberius stick. It was a moment that confused Trekkies and casual viewers alike. In the second pilot of Star Trek, the original series, Where No Man Has Gone Before, a granite tombstone ominously marked with James R. Kirk stood ready to memorialize the still-living captain of the USS Enterprise. And for decades, fans asked, why R? His full name, as every loyal viewer now knows, is James Tiberius Kirk. So what gives? The simplest answer, of course, is a production oversight. But Star Trek fans don't settle for simple answers. In a universe of time travel, psychic phenomena, alien gods, and omnipotent beings with a flair for drama, there must be a deeper reason. So let's set phasers to speculate and dive into a creative explanation of why Captain Kirk's tombstone bore the wrong middle initial. The omniscience of Gary Mitchell, or lack thereof. First, let's consider the episode's antagonist, Lieutenant Commander Gary Mitchell. Once Kirk's close friend, Mitchell gains godlike psychic powers after the Enterprise crosses the galactic barrier. He reads minds, manipulates matter, and eventually tries to take over the crew. But even gods can make mistakes. Mitchell creates Kirk's Tombstone using his mind. He wills it into existence as a psychological weapon, taunting Kirk with his impending death. But Mitchell is still human, or was, and perhaps, amid his rapid evolution and growing arrogance, he got a simple detail wrong. Could this mistake be symbolic? As Mitchell's humanity is eroded by power, so is his memory of Kirk, his friend. The R represents a disconnect. He thinks he knows Kirk, but he no longer truly does. The wrong initial on the tombstone is more than a factual error. It's a metaphor for how far Mitchell has drifted from his humanity, and from the very people who cared about him. The ripple of alternate realities. Now let's get speculative. The Star Trek multiverse is rich with alternate timelines and branching realities. Maybe, just maybe, the Kirk that Gary Mitchell remembered did have an R for a middle initial in his universe. As Mitchell's powers expanded, he began to see glimpses of other timelines, other versions of events. His mind, overwhelmed with cosmic insight, confused the Kirk in front of him with one from a parallel dimension. In that dimension, James Romulus Kirk, because if you're going to go with R, let's make it dramatic, grew up on a different path. Perhaps he never joined Starfleet, or perhaps he rose through the ranks under vastly different circumstances. Maybe he and Mitchell were bitter rivals, not friends. And in a twist of cosmic irony, Mitchell's subconscious tried to warn Kirk of this multiversal instability with that single, misplaced letter. Section 31 secret code. Or maybe, just maybe, the R wasn't a mistake at all. Maybe it was a message. Enter Section 31, Starfleet's secretive intelligence agency. Known for manipulating events from the shadows, what if they embedded a code into that gravestone? Perhaps R is an abbreviation, resurrected, or redacted. Maybe Kirk was part of an experiment, his identity modified, and the Mitchell incident triggered dormant programming or memories. The tombstone was meant to awaken something. After all, if you're going to mess with someone's identity in a clandestine psychological trial, what better way than to forge a tombstone with a small but deeply unsettling error? That's not my name, Kirk says. But how can he be sure? A whisper from the future. What if it wasn't Mitchell who made the tombstone? Think bigger. Perhaps a being from the future, Q, the temporal Cold War agents, or a rogue time traveler, subtly manipulated events in this episode to create a crack in the timeline. The R on the tombstone was a fracture point, a test to see how the universe would react. Like the butterfly effect, a single misplaced letter might spiral into galactic consequences centuries later. Maybe in a forgotten timeline, James R. Kirk did die that day, but something or someone intervened, splintering that timeline and preserving Kirk in ours. The R is an echo, a remnant from the road not taken. Or maybe it was just Gary being petty. Let's ground this again. What if Gary Mitchell, knowing full well that Kirk's middle name was Tiberius, wrote R just to mess with him? Think about it. You're a near omnipotent being. You're toying with your old friend before delivering a dramatic monologue. What better way to unnerve him than to screw up something small, something intimate? You know he'll see it. You know it'll bother him. Kirk was always the confident one, the man in command. The tombstone wasn't just a threat, it was a jab, a reminder that,